What a great discussion you guys had last week. And I was able to go in and gave all kinds of comments and feedback about this discussion. In some cases, I provided some other references and links that you might want to check out. But one of the number one concepts that kept coming up was that of eye flow, and how for some of us, eye flow was the same. We looked at the same element first, and then our eyes tracked to the same position next, to a third and fourth, on the way through the infographic that you shared. But in a few cases, a few of us didn't follow that same eye flow method. And there's tons of research about eye flow out there, but you guys very wonderfully illustrated that not all research is perfect, and that we don't always look at the same element in the same order. There's all sorts of differences that play into why our eyes go to a different area first. So for example, on screen, you'll see an example of an eye flow diagram, and it starts off in the upper right-hand corner with a series of what look like controls, and then it moves diagonally down towards the left and then diagonally down towards the right in a zigzag pattern. If you're a fan of comic books, then this kind of follows that same concept. However, personally, when I first saw this image, the first thing I looked at was the black box. I didn't go to those commands in the upper right corner. So it's not precise. And then the other comment that came up again and again was that of font size and what's appropriate. Now, there were a number of mentions about infographics using too many different fonts in the same image. Thank you guys for noticing that. It's a very common design mistake, and I'm sure we were all guilty of it at some point, but now that we know better, we see the fault in that type of design. At the same time, size is important. And it's not just the size, but also the font face. I give you an example in the discussion of how the font face Helvetica New at 12 points is slightly smaller than the American typewriter font at 12 points. So not all font faces are created equal either, and we really have to take that into consideration. But that also plays into the social nature of how we share images. And we don't necessarily know in what medium that design will turn up. If it's printed, what size is appropriate? If it's on screen, well, now you're really getting technical because different users have different screen resolutions. I keep my resolution set very high, so things look very tiny to some people. And I have to remember that sometimes when I'm designing. All of that plays into it. And then last but not least, the concept of resources and references on infographics. All too often, they're not included at all, and even when they are included, sometimes it's just a link. But on a static image, how do you provide a link to that URL? Is providing that URL just enough? Arguably not, especially when it's a very long or complex URL, and that gets into an entirely different side of design. So all of that to say, great job with last week's discussion, and be sure to pop back in to check out the different comments that I had for each of you. So let's take a look at this week. Use the on-screen navigation to access another section of this week's overview.